is a futurist who examines new technologies when they are still in the laboratory and considers what their impact will be on the world and on society. He's the founder and CEO of Signal and Cipher, and he also helps companies all over the world deal with the quickly developing tech landscape. Ian, thank you so much for joining us.
Lisa, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So people are concerned with AI in the news every day, some new development. People are worrying, will it take my job? Will the kid next to me in English class who uses ChatGPT for his assignment get a better grade than I did when I didn't cheat? And people are wondering about these platonic and even romantic relationships with bots. But Ian, you say we shouldn't panic. You say you're optimistic. Please help us sort this all out. Let's start with work. Will I lose my job because of AI?
Well, to your point about not panicking, first of all, panic is never the answer. One of the challenges overall within the debate is that both sides are not really we're shouting past each other. The people who are really afraid of AI, truly fearful of it, are focusing mostly on the most dire possible imaginable consequences of AI. And there's a kernel of truth in some of these things. That's usually how these work. That little bit of truth sprouts to create something that's much bigger than itself. And on the other side, on the technophile side, the people who are creating these technologies and really supportive of it, they're also not listening to the more human needs and emotional needs of the people who are actually afraid of this. It's more benefit for society. It's a greater good. Let's look long term. Let's not care about the details. But the details matter. And the details matter when it comes to our work and our jobs. And when we talk about what AI's impact on jobs will be, I'm in the camp of near term, it's more augmentation than automation. However, over time, we will see some sectors that are impacted more so than others. To give an example, customer service is going to be completely dominated by AI within the next 5 years. We're already starting to see it. However, in the meantime, it's mostly augmented by AI. There's a recent study called Generative AI in the Workplace that showed that agents who had access to generative AI were able to essentially accelerate their position on the learning curve significantly over those who didn't have it. Not surprising, but what is interesting is it actually takes the place of mentorship and tacit knowledge that's usually passed down from more experienced agents to those who are inexperienced. And that's something that we experienced when we moved to remote workplaces during the pandemic. There was this missing of the mentorship, the conversations that happen in the hallways, the learning by watching, and the apprenticeship nature of being taught how to do your job. That doesn't really exist in remote work environments. But what AI is doing is it's helping codify and provide a lot of that tacit knowledge that is passed down oftentimes from managers, more experienced agents within a business, to people who are brand new to it. So it gives them that leg up, replaces a problem that was created by one of the more predominant shifts within our culture in the last couple of years. So it's a give and a take. It's never binary. It's never one or the other.
And presumably it could help create jobs because there will be new applications and new uses for people who can learn to use it, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen this as a traditional development of the cycles of disruption and evolution of technology. Everything from electricity, moving us from steam power to assembly line fashion. We had factory workers that grew an entire middle class, which then created suburbia, which created the automobile, or the automobile created suburbia, which created new industries. So we can create a straight line from things like electricity to the ski industry. That's, if you take hops from one to the next, those are things that you could not have imagined when you're working with Thomas Edison to create a factory that generates electricity for a nearby neighborhood. Getting that to a new tourist industry in the Dolomites is something you're not thinking of at that point in time. You can't possibly say that's what's going to create this. And we're in a very similar space with AI. We have to think kind of orders of magnitude greater than that linear move, what's obviously next. But that's also part of where that fear and optimism comes in. The fear is, I can only see this going one way. If it's augmenting and automating more and more my job, the only natural way to look at this is it's going to automate all of my job, and then I'm out. I'm done. I'm no longer useful. And what I think is going to happen is we're actually going to be moving more to a generalist style operating model. And I call this the era of the creative generalist. What AI does is essentially makes it possible for anyone to work proficiently and competently in spaces and skill sets that are not really their domain. So I may be a strategist, but I actually need to operate more as a lawyer for a short bit of time to create my contracts, to understand what I'm signing in terms of contracts I might be dealing with, to understand what's legal within my space. Or for a while, I might actually have to be an artist and create the artwork for my posts and for my content and maybe even some video. All those things are I can do competently with those skill sets that AI is helping with. Now, that also creates fear of those skills going away. When you have this across the board and it's impacting every single sector of knowledge work and creative work, it doesn't take away a whole field or a role. What it does is it puts everyone again on that same playing field. Now, it's raised the bar for both mediocrity as well as those who are going to be excellent. So we're going to get a lot more mediocre content, which is what some people are focusing on. But for those who truly invest, the work that they can do is exponentially greater, higher volume, and more effective and more efficient. So you can work across boundaries you never could have before. You'll be able to do more work, but you'll also be able to bring more of yourself to your work. So if you have interests in things like photography or architecture or art and design, but you've never been able to monetize that or bring that into the work that you do, AI enables you to do precisely that. So while we are becoming more like machines in our typical workplace, the machines are becoming more human-like in terms of the capabilities. That can actually be used to your advantage to bring your whole self to your work in a more positive and productive way.
Okay, I see the optimism. I hear you. I hear you on that. Let's switch gears to education. And when ChatGPT came out towards the end of the year, I had teenagers who were super excited to use it to write English papers. And then, of course, the teacher said, "We will be able to catch you if you write it for your English paper." Also, college essays for applications. Where do you see this all shaking out? And how's education going to change because of this AI that can write beautiful English papers for a student?
Absolutely. It's a change that many of us kind of saw coming for a while, and there have been whole industries built around this. Chegg is feeling the sting right now from ChatGPT, but that's also an industry that was accused of helping students cheat on tests, exams, papers, etc. Students are always going to look for a way to kind of work this system. And I have a very controversial perspective on this, and I say go for it. For a specific reason. The education system has not changed for a very, very long time. And the goals are noble. The goals are to teach us to think critically, to prepare us for the real world when we step out so that we become functioning and productive citizens within society. The problem is the model that we have doesn't check a single one of those boxes now because the game has changed so much, forcing students to say, we're going to teach you how to write an essay when the world will no longer require that. It's kind of like saying, well, we don't force you to write in cursive anymore.
Right.
That was a skill that we all learned, and for many people, some people remember when they were forced to still in senior high school to write in cursive because it was something you needed to have. And we hold on to these very tight because these are the way things ought to be. Education moves slowly for a reason, for a good reason. We don't want to be playing games with the way our children learn on a regular basis so that they don't have a semblance of consistency. The challenge is they're entering a world which is changing on a dime. And students realize this. So natively and naturally, they're going to go and find ways to work within the new system that they're inheriting. And for right now, that looks like cheating and finding ways to use these tools in these systems. Over time, these systems are going to become commonplace and accepted. We're already seeing certain professors saying, use ChatGPT in the class. I expect you to be using it, but here are the things I'm going to expect of you. And if we go back to first principles, what are we actually trying to do with our students? That's how we re-engineer the education system, acknowledging the new tools that we have at our disposal. So what are we trying to do? We're not trying to teach people how to create the perfect 5-page English paper. That's useless when you actually leave college. What's useful about that is the critical reasoning that you learn by doing that process.
Right.
By actually spending the time researching it, getting intimately familiar with it. And the fear, which is well-founded, is that we're not going to do any of that. We're going to let AI do the work, and then we're all going to go play video games while that happens. There are going to be some people who do that. There's always going to be people game the system and don't care. We can't fix that. But what we can do is for the people who are going to invest, give them a system and a requirement that helps them excel and build the skills for tomorrow. So, for example, where English papers might go is help me understand your reasoning skills. As a teacher, I could actually be able to see what your chat GPT prompts are. So I'm giving you an assignment and I'm going to ask you to interact with chat GPT agent as if it was the author of Wuthering Heights or a character in a specific novel. Have a conversation with that character. Show me how you understand the dynamic of that character with other characters in the novel and how that changed over time. Ask them questions about what it felt like to be in this specific situation and then expound upon that. Build a relationship with this person and then tell me what this means to your life. What does it mean to the stories that we tell ourselves about society? And those are the things you can start to say, I see the questions you're asking. I see the avenues you're going down. I see the hypotheses that you're testing with this character and the conclusions that you're coming to. That's what a paper is all about.
I
But
like
now we're
it.
changing the interface and we're changing the interaction. And this is something that is, at the fact that it's recorded already, we can plug into an interface that teachers can look at and even see this in real time while they're in a classroom, while they're at home. All this stuff is possible. So I think that students in education are going to try to change rapidly, but it can be for the better. It doesn't have to be for the better. It can actually be for the worse if we force systems that don't belong. But I personally believe that this can be really tailored for students in ways they weren't before.
Amazing. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I see where the thought process is going, and yeah, it is a more certainly more interesting way of learning. Let's switch to relationships quickly, and if you would explain to me this idea of a synthetic human and the uneasiness that many of us feel when we think about having a relationship, platonic or romantic, with a synthetic
Mm-hmm.
human. You say that's okay?
Okay is a matter of opinion. Um, I think it's already happening. Is the case. So a synthetic human is essentially is that it is a human-like form that's really ones and zeros. It is generated by generative AI, so it's synthetic media. Synthetic media is any piece of media that is generated wholly or partially manipulated by an algorithm, which 5 years ago was a little bit of content, and then it became deep fakes and the scare around that. And now synthetic media is a whole host of things from the images you get from Midjourney to videos that are popping up to synthetic humans that look precisely like me. I have my own synthetic human that I use for broadcast and defiance media on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And it essentially is a digital double of me that I can use to create content with that makes it so I don't have to go step in a studio and do production and it can essentially do my segment for me. It doesn't replace me, it augments me. But that digital double, that synthetic human, can be used for all matter of things. It can be used to scale your workplace productivity or as a relationship. So there are many people who have built relationships, both platonic and romantic, with synthetic beings. Replica is one particular app that got very popular for doing this. And there's a particular YouTube video by a guy, his channel is No Borscht for You. I highly recommend checking it out. He spends 20 minutes talking about how he built a romantic relationship with a chatbot and what that was like. And he goes into the deep emotional appeal that came from this. And it's shocking to some people that this could possibly ever happen, but it shouldn't be because we develop really tight bonds with other species all the time. Our pets are incredibly important to us. They are like family. And some people, they're the baby, the kid, and the family. When it comes to characters in a novel or a movie, have you ever had that really tense feeling when something bad happened to a character you cared about in a book? Or in a movie, have you ever shouted at the screen when you're like, whatever was happening, like you just don't believe it? That's because you build a bond with that character. And what's to say, why can't we have those bonds with artificial beings that are designed to elicit emotional responses from us? Now, where there's some tension is that idea of eliciting an emotional response from a human being from something that's digital. We've had some really dark lessons
Mhm.
from that type of an interaction in the past. Cambridge Analytica, disinformation, like there are horrible ways to take this technology. However, when it comes to relationships, there's a foregone conclusion that people are going to build them. They already are, and it's going to happen at scale.
Well, thank you for that explanation. And thank you for all your wisdom and your looks into the future for us. I really, really appreciate it, Ian. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And now we are going to shift to our pioneer profile. Today, we introduce you to Walter McMath. Walter is a lawyer who talks to us about safety and privacy in the metaverse and in Web3 and ways that he feels the law needs to catch up. And he also talks about how VR and AR could help in the courtroom when he's presenting an argument towards the judge or when he can take jurors to a crime scene using virtual reality to take a closer look at the evidence. Here's Walter.